Before continuing, I want to talk about what science is and why this project is important for the future of science. It's not critical. It's not at the bedrock, but it is a contribution to the future of health science. Science comes from, originally, the first scientists were known as the pre-Socratics, and they're known as the pre-Socratics because they came before Socrates. They were only known as pre-Socratics after Socrates made his impact on Athens and on the Western world. These guys were interested in the natural world. Socrates was interested in something slightly different. Well, not slightly different, entirely different. Instead of looking at the stars, I think to paraphrase Cicero, instead of looking at the stars, Socrates was interested in mankind. But what we know Socrates for and how he made his impact on science was through his method, his dialectical method, dialogue. Dialectic and dialogue are from the same Greek root, and they mean to talk to one another. And we actually get remnants of that in the way we describe, say, biology, which is to say, or geography, or geology, or any of the other ologies, which we often translate as the study of. Ology, we think, oh, that means the study of bio, which is study of life. But actually, another way to translate that would be discussion of. Ology actually comes from logos, which is the word, which it actually could be better translated as discussion. So biology, instead of calling it the study of, could be called the discussion of. And actually, I think that illustrates what biology is much more than translating it as the study of. Because if you think of the study of, it's something set in stone. It's something that is permanent, or it's a dogma or ideology. But if you think of the discussion about, then that changes the meaning so that it becomes a dynamic and a field in flux, in constant flux. And I think that better represents what science actually is. It is a field in flux. There are fields in flux, knowledge in flux, and a discussion between human beings about what the world is, rather than something that's set in stone, something that is a definite reflection of what actually exists. Rather, it's a reflection of the interaction between human beings in the world, and in particular with each other via a discussion. I hope that makes sense. So Socrates had a big impact on the way we orient ourselves toward thinking about the world, and that is to say, through a constant communication of our own individual findings and errors inherent in those in that communication, and inherent in the process of finding and investigating the world. We're communicating all of that to other people, the good and the bad of what we do as science, because our science is never going to be perfect. And then other people are taking that and thinking, what might be some of the problems with some of the things that we've said? And what might be some ways to better refine those concepts so as to get to a better understanding of the facts that are being discussed? And so science takes a dialogical form. It takes a form of different people discussing with each other, sharing, and essentially bringing all their collective minds together so as to understand reality and better refine that understanding. Cool. What happens, though, whenever we deny or neglect or refuse dialogue with each other, which is to say, when we start to speak in terms of a scientific language that is inconsistent between different people, and we refuse to engage each other in that scientific process, and instead we just start saying what we want to believe, rather than trying to refine with others in the presence and in the within the cooperation with others of truth. What happens when we decide that we have the truth and we don't need to engage anymore with other people? And this is tantamount to a rejection of science, because the foundation of science is dialogue. Because we're checking our perceptions of the world with other people's perceptions of the world and other people's interpretations and other people's interactions and interventions in the world, so that we can then clarify and come to the most accurate, at least in terms of human perception, understanding of what the world is. What happens when we reject that? Well, everybody can start to say their own thing. Why is that a problem, though? Well, it's a problem because when everybody can just start to say their own thing based upon their own whims and their own desires and their own likes, and they're not engaging with each other, then we no longer have any common language for collective action. So let's take health science or nutrition science in particular. If someone like Gary Taubes says that all obesity is caused by carbohydrate consumption is the cause of all obesity, but this directly contradicts most of the available evidence, the vast majority of available evidence, and this case rests upon looking at the evidence in a highly biased manner. And then let's say Gary can then convince thousands or tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people. Say he can convince millions of people, which I would say that he perhaps has been responsible for, directly or indirectly. Then those millions of people are going to start thinking that carbohydrates are the cause of obesity, in contradiction to the actual research, the actual scientific findings that other people are coming to. What happens then? Well, then we can't agree upon how to address obesity. Some people say we have to get rid of carbohydrates, and some people say we have to change the food environment, the food culture, maybe even perhaps people's value systems, social and economic inequality, things like that. Then we start to have a proliferation of different points of view that are in contradiction with each other and that are not being refined by a constant dialogue and reevaluation in terms of what we actually find in the real world. Because people are just deciding at a whim, Gary Taubes is deciding at a whim, that he's going to continue to believe these things despite what the scientific findings actually show us. And we can do that for a lot of different nutritional paradigms. We can do that for veganism. We can do that for any sort of cult nutritional paradigm where I want to just believe what I want to believe for my own reasons, because I love the animals, because I want money, because low carb worked for me, because I like to fast and it makes me feel good, or because I come from a culture that didn't eat after 5 p.m. or something. So, and I'm deeply emotionally tied to that culture, and it works for me to help me not gain weight because I'm not going to eat as many calories. Okay. And then I'm going to go start explaining it in terms of circadian rhythms, which is not about circadian rhythms. That's almost certainly false, or maybe we can say it's certainly false. Okay. So when we all have these entirely contradictory paradigms and we're not willing to talk to each other about it, and we're communicating to the public and to policymakers these contradictory paradigms, then we can't do anything about it. There's no way of collective action at that point because there's so much confusion about what we actually should be doing, because scientific concepts have practical implications. When we talk about whether carbohydrates are causing obesity, then if they are causing obesity, then we need to restrict carbohydrates. But if they're not causing obesity, then we don't need to restrict carbohydrates. But then if we have all these different paradigms of what's causing obesity, what's causing chronic disease, and they have all totally different implications for what action should be, then we can't actually agree upon what to do. we can't actually agree upon what to do for obesity and for nutrition policy and for health policy. So, furthermore, we need to actually know it's true. The scientific method, as far as human perception and human action is concerned, is the best way of approaching reality. Now, that's not to say that there are not other ways of approaching reality that might not yield some fruits in some other respects. I want to be agnostic about that because that's not my area, and I don't have any dogmatic opinion about that. But what I can say is, if we're interested in how to best act and behave, if we think of science as an approach to the world that is very techne oriented, that is to say, we're interested in crafting and in figuring things out in usages, and I think modern science is very good at that. It's very good at efficient causes, which is to say, it's good at knowing the world in such a way that we can make things useful. In contrast to, say, episteme, which is knowing the world more theoretically. If we're interested in practical action, then rejecting science, which is what these diet gurus do for all these different reasons and motivations, and I think a lot of it comes down to money and power, we're going to be unable to act as a society to actually address the problems that we have in front of us. So this project, this quack list, is about helping people to understand who we should be listening to and who we should not be listening to, so as to get rid of the noise and come to a collective understanding based on science, which can be efficacious for solving our problems. And the current situation is not going to work for solving our problems. We must understand that the current situation, which consists of a bunch of people saying all sorts of different things that have nothing to do with reality and that withdraw from dialogue, withdraw from discussion with each other, and so we no longer have reality testing working properly for many of these diet cults. This current situation is not going to result in a good outcome for nutrition, obesity policy, etc. Therefore, we have to draw a line and say, these are the people we should be listening to and talking about and working with in order to solve our problems. And these are the people we should be ignoring. These are the people who are harmful to our discussion, who are not helping us, who are destructive or oriented mainly towards money. Okay? So that's what this project is about. It's about promoting science so that we can solve our social problems, so that we can solve the problems that are confronting our society, and then trying to destroy the people who are not oriented towards coming to understand what the truth is according to the way that science understands it, which is to say it's oriented towards action. People who are not concerned with collective action, who are not concerned with promoting and building collectively a better future for our society. People who are concerned with money and power and their own personal whims and et cetera, et cetera. We need to promote the good people. We need to discourage the bad people and marginalize the bad people so that we can then have a common language for talking about the world. And then we do talk about the world with each other, come to conclusions, and then act in such ways to solve our problems and to help people. And so this is what the quack list is about. It's not about me grinding my axe against enemies. It's not about my own personal opinion, although my personal opinion is going to enter into it somewhat because I'm one human who's making this list. I'm taking advice and input from as many people as I can. So if you don't like some of the things that I put there, and you have constructive criticism. You say, okay, no, this person doesn't belong on this list. This person does belong on this list, etc. I want to hear it because that's the spirit of science. But in as much as I'm one of the only ones who's going to put their neck out for this, which is why, I'm basically saying what a lot of other people already agree with and already know all around the world. We are all speaking the same language behind doors. We're all saying the same basic things about who's good and who's not, because it's very obvious to people who are trained in science, like who's just totally out there and who's not. But very few people are going to want to say these things because there's a lot of potential costs that come with saying some of these things. So I have to do it alone for now, but I need people's input, and I'm doing this in the spirit of science and nothing else. And so please give me your input. Please give me your feedback. Send me direct messages. Tell me I'm wrong. I want to know when I'm wrong, and I want to correct the record when I'm wrong. Thank you for watching the video.